When I introduced myself in this course, I said that my credibility rests in the American Government in Christian Perspective textbook. That your getting through those assignments is really what was going to fulfill the minimum objectives of the course. Anything that I give you beyond that is to stimulate you beyond that, so you will be rocking your world by being salt and light in it because of having an education. And not merely it's my own indoctrination. So, what's your question?
I was going to say the first week you told us to forget about the identify things.
When
we asked you about them, you said forget about
I
them.
misunderstood your question. If it's in the, I thought that he was referring to that extra bonus thing that was there. Page 74 in relation to the assignment, the section assignment. Yeah, the point is, and again, let me just say on that, it's for your benefit, okay? The goal is to meet not just a memorization, but a comprehension of what you've been dealing with. Okay? So my fault. Any other questions before I get to Jason? Jason, I'm gonna ask you a question. And you can go back in time to a previous week. Let's just hypothetically say somebody else asked you, even a woman. So, Jason, are you learning anything?
Even a woman?
Even a woman. Isha. Are you learning anything?
Yes.
That's not what you said a week ago when hypothetically my wife asked you. She said, are you learning anything? And you said,
I don't remember what I said.
aha! Very good. You will make a beautiful politician. I don't recall. Well, I move that we strike everything that Jason said so far because he has no reliable memory. Jason, you said it's been told you, so can you absolutely say that you did not say no when somebody posed that question to you? Let the record show he's stalling. So, okay, I'm sorry, I had fun with that. What we're going to do today, everybody did their section, so what I'm going to have you do, I gave you some handouts today, something that you're going to be doing in the future. And I have notes here. Here it is. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to go to page 62 in your textbook. And you're also going to get out. Yes. You're going to get your textbook, page 62, and then also the Blackstone commentaries that I gave you a couple of weeks ago that you've done a lot of stuff in, done a lot of work reading through that. I want you to turn to page 9.
On which one? Sir William Blackstone?
In the Blackstone commentaries where it's the introduction, the second, and the commentaries of Sir William Blackstone, commentaries on the laws of England.
So the first Blackstone one you gave.
Yeah, not the ones I just gave you just moments ago.
Alright.
I'm going to have to get the silly thing out myself. Introduction, section the first. I gave you section the first today. Book the first, chapter the first. Nope, that's absolute right of individuals. It is study of the law, section the first. Where's that silly thing? Where's my copy? Ruh-roh. I'm gonna have to get Christian and Matthew to share or something.
Carrying his carry.
Every little thing that we are wearing.
What? Oh, you guys not seen that?
Do you both have yours?
My original commentary that you first gave us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Share with him momentarily, Matthew. Share with.
Oh, okay.
Page 62 in your textbook. Was there a podium, little
I can
pulpit?
get you a podium.
No. I don't, sure,
You
yeah,
said-
go ahead,
borrow
okay,
the
please,
stand.
thank you. Does anybody have any questions about what you read this week at all? Okay, let's see, what I remembered you read, was that it's introducing you to the Constitution. It gave you an outline of the Constitution of the United States. It told you what year that it was formed and framed. That was after the Articles of Confederation. They did their best to kind of have some kind of thing, some kind of legal mechanism that they could communicate to other nations. And it showed you the outline of the Constitution. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to review just a couple of statements there that I think are mightily motivating. It's going to go on this running humorous theme of seeing that what the founders were reading and what they said was based on something that was already there. There was things that they were reading and they were all familiar with which they were familiar. Whatever. Somebody tell me how to say that without ending in a preposition. And I'm going to go into this commentary of Sir William Blackstone, and we're going to look at the structure of government before we actually read the Constitution, which will begin this next week. You're going to see that based on the kind of things they said in the text, they said that they had gone and looked at a bunch of stuff to see what worked before, and they tried to do their best to recreate it. If it wasn't already done, if there wasn't something that fit, they had to come up with a good reason why they were going to do what they were going to do. It was not whimsical. And we're going to pull some of this out of Sir William Blackstone's commentaries. So on page 62, you see a quote, James Madison. They tell us he's short. Okay, well, good for him. So he wasn't a volleyball player. I need a reader. Okay, Matthew, first hand up. Next time I'll do last hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, is it the I go on this?
I
great-
go on, do it
Fine.
with feeling, project.
I go on this great Republican principle that the people will have virtue and intelligence to select men of virtue and wisdom. Is there no virtue among us? If there be not, we are in a wretched situation. No theoretical checks, no form of government can render us secure. To suppose that any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without virtue in the people is a chimerical, is that right?
Yeah, chimerical idea. It
Chimerical
means-
idea.
Does anybody know what that means? One word? Laughable.
Yes.
That's their nice word, big word. They all went William and Mary, and they could have just said laughable. It is laughable. Go ahead.
If there be sufficient virtue and intelligence in the community, it will be exercised in the selection of these men, so that we do not depend on their virtue or put confidence in our rulers, but in the people who are to choose them.
They had a biblical worldview. We're fallen. Right? They all understand that. Now go to Sir William Blackstone's commentaries, page 9. Okay, we're going to use Matthew again to read that first paragraph. Chapter on page 9 on the study of laws in general.
With the big
Introduction,
four.
the second. 4.
Okay. For when society is once formed, government results, of course, as necessary to preserve and to keep that society in order, unless some superior were constituted, whose commands and decisions all the members are bound to obey, they would still remain as in a state of nature, without any judge upon the earth to define their several rights and redress their several wrongs.
Now stop there. I noticed they used constitution, so this is good going into, as we lead into the constitution and what they understood to be the superior. What was the sovereign entity of government and what was the most important? We're going to see how that develops here. So go ahead.
But as all the members of society are naturally equal, it may be asked, in whose hands are the reins of government to be entrusted? To this, the general answer is easy, but the application of it to particular cases has occasionized one half of those mischiefs which are apt to proceed from misguided political zeal.
In other words, we're all corrupt.
Okay.
Okay, keep going.
In general, all mankind will agree that government should be reposed in such persons in whom those qualities are most likely to be found, the perfection of which are among the attributes of him who is emphatically styled in the supreme being.
All right, whoever has the most godly character.
The three grand requisites, I mean, of wisdom, of goodness, and of power. Wisdom, to discern the real
Interest. Okay, that's int, but yeah, it's English word, yeah, go ahead.
Interests of the community. Goodness, to endeavor always to pursue that real interest.
Okay.
And strength or power to carry this knowledge and intention into action.
Okay.
These are the natural foundations of sovereignty, and these are the requisites that ought to be found in every well-constituted frame of government.
One of the things that, does anybody have any questions on that before I comment? All right. So there's two things to consider. Who it is that we ought to have as people that we're going to put into positions. And this was in English Times. He went in to describe what they said in England was what their perception was of three branches of government and what the purpose was, what the check and the balance was. So we're going to see how England did it in their frame of government, and then we're going to see in the Constitution of the United States how it changed. How do you have an aristocracy without an aristocracy?
You don't.
Well, you do. You're going to have to figure out how to pull that off. What were the benefits of the aristocracy? How are you going to incorporate it? There was a wonderful madness to that method. There was a value that we're going to look at here, and the various what they call different branches of government, which are a little bit different than we see today. But also this point of looking at, just as James Madison made comments, it's not going to work if you don't have moral people in these positions. The whole place goes to pot. That affects everybody. And it occurred to me as I was preparing for this today was that, you know what? It very well may be you in this room. Yeah, maybe, you think, well, what am I going to do when I grow up or whatever? Lord, what do you have for me? What path am I going to go on? It very well may be you, not just in your voting for somebody, but for actually going, go to the silly political party meeting and have the little discussions in the local caucus about what the policy ought to be salt and light in the community. And when they start voicing their passions, their particular personal int, instead of understanding the framework of the law of nature and the law of God and what are the boundaries and interests of government really is, and to use self-control to make sure that your int and your passion isn't what's persuading the policy, but actually step back with these things in mind and influence policy to that thing that's intended to preserve society. Maybe you could be a judge. Maybe a judge who, instead of just going along with the flow, this is just enforcement machinery. Part of this is part of our income is how many people we go, thank you, dismissed, court costs. Whatever. What are the real rights? What are the purpose of government? What are the boundaries? What is the court's role? Why did suddenly the court system become the third branch of government? What was the purpose of that? It very well may be that you are the one who preserves American society, not merely by holding Bible studies at home, but Bible studies out in public by what you say and what you bring into society. That's my motivating speech. Now we're going to proceed. We're going to go to that same page 9. We're going to do a lot of reading today. How the several, in the next paragraph you see Blackstone say, and remember, when the Constitutional Convention was occurring, these people had read this, and they're searching for what are we going to do, and why are we going to do it? Here's a comment in this next chapter, paragraph, how the several forms of government we now see in the world at first actually began as a matter of blah, 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 blah. It goes on to just saying how this all happened, and it's just kind of an intro. But let's go to the next paragraph. The political writers of antiquity will not allow more than 3 regular forms of government. Oh, that's interesting. If I was going to frame a constitution, I might want to read this. The first, when the sovereign power is lodged in an aggregate assembly consisting of all the members of a community, which is called a, we did that definition. Okay, mob rule. And he's going to describe, of course, this is a review now, what's the best attribute of this, well-intended mob. The second, when it's lodged in a council composed of select members, and then it is styled an aristocracy. So at this point in England, they had a council, the Lord's temporal and the Lord's spiritual, the House of Lords, the upper house, the upper chamber of Parliament. If you go up to the House of Burgesses, you do your little tour up in Williamsburg, there's 2 wings to the building, right? And they're going to have a house of, it's effectively the local representatives of the common person, and then those who are selected because of their being wise or having positions or power, influence in society, status, whatever it might be. In fact, you're going to read in something I've handed you that Blackstone attributed these people of wealth and aristocracy of having the time necessary to study these very important matters. That it was actually falling on their shoulders because of the blessing of the Lord on their life, so that they've got people doing the work on the plantation or farm or whatever they got, They've got people doing this work. Now it's important on them to look after those people by knowing the Word of God, knowing the law, knowing the history of law, and how to protect the rights of themselves, but also when there's a controversy in the community. They're a little bit removed, a little bit objective between the 2 parties. They're not at the same station as Matthew and Christians. So when they've got a complaint and they voice their concerns, here's somebody who's a little bit out of the fray, out of the weeds, to hopefully make an objective opinion. Okay, that's what they were thinking here with this aristocracy. The last, when it is entrusted in the hands of a single person, then it takes the name of, power in the hands of one person is a monarchy. Good. The king. All other species of government, they say, are either corruptions or reducible to these 3. Okay, here we are. We're going to frame this government. What are the problems we're having? Oh, we've got a few problems here. We really don't have a strong monarch in our current status. Let's keep reading Blackstone. You see what's going on here? If this is what they're reading, besides other things, this guy is a French name, so I know I'm not pronouncing it right. Montesquieu. He talked about, there are other people that they were familiar with that they knew were talking about separation of powers. Samuel Rutherford, and whether the king has this great prerogative from God that he could do anything. No. Samuel Rutherford is somebody that had been reading and said, no, the king is subject to the law of God. Everybody's subject to the law of God. Everybody. The king isn't the law is king, effectively. So that's the kind of mindset. They'd been reading other people. Let's go on to the next page. Page 10. By the sovereign powers was before observed, this meant the making of laws. Who can make the laws? Is it the monarch? Is it the courts? Is it the legislature? Or is it the people? Whatever that power resides, all others must conform to and be directed by it. That's the sovereign power. Whatever appearance the outward form and administration the government may put on, for it is at any time the option of the legislature to alter that form and administration by new edict or rule, and to put the execution of the laws into whatever hands it pleases. And all other powers of the state must obey the legislature power in the execution of their several functions, or else the Constitution is at an end. Reading that and reading other things that these guys have read, they understood, the real sovereignty comes from and is manifested by a legislature, some represented by the people, some this aristocracy group getting together and make a determination what's probably the right course of action set in stone, set in writing. Is it necessary for us to interfere with people? Do we really need a law? If everything's operating correctly, just let it roll. But if there's a problem, how do we, by law, by legislation, maybe fix the problem? Or regulate it so everybody's operating on the same sheet of music and it'll work better. Okay? Nobody's offending somebody because they're operating two different laws. A lot of these things are coming into play. And so they understood the legislature was actually the stronger power in their form of government in England at the time. Now let's go to the next paragraph. In a democracy where the right of making laws resides in the people at large, public virtue. Here's the benefit of having the int of the people. Public virtue or goodness of intention is more likely to be found than either of the other qualities of government. And that's what people trying to start riots will appeal to, the hearts of the people. That's what Lenin appealed to, the hearts of the people. At least they're saying they're doing it. That's for all the proletariats, all the little guys. This is what we're doing it for. So we're going to take power over everybody, just the few of us. Yes, it's the 99% is the reason why this 1% is completely controlling everything they think. Okay, so they're going to appeal to the passion of the people. That's democracy. So he says, virtue is the benefit. That's why you go to the people, and we're going to see what they did in the ratification of the Constitution. I think they mentioned in the textbook that certain states ratified it through their legislatures. Massachusetts was the first one that went to the people and said, hey guys, what do you think? What should we do about our state constitution? That was in the text. Okay? And then it mentioned that eventually the U.S. Constitution was ratified by the states. Yeah, but to the people. It actually went to the people, and you saw they listed in the text the preamble. We, the people of the United States, because of our goodness and virtue, have said, okay, we're going to partner with this. So this motivated them. Where the right resides in the people at large, virtue. Popular assemblies are frequently foolish in their contrivance and weak in their execution, but generally mean to do the thing that is right and just and always have a degree of patriotism or public spirit. Next thing. Aristocracies, there's more wisdom to be found. Now, what's the purpose of an aristocracy being an influence on government? I just said it. What? Okay, there's what?
More wisdom.
Altogether, what's the benefit of an aristocracy?
More wisdom.
All right, so that's the benefit of aristocracy. There is more wisdom to be found than in the other frames of government. Now, here's their composition. This changed with the United States Constitution. Here they had a Lord's temporal and Lord's spiritual. Some people were elevated into positions of comfort because of their ecclesiastical office, and they were found to be somebody everybody respected, and at that point, the church and state were in one sort of business. They had different branches, sort of, different offices, but they had people that were property owners and people of the church, leaders of the church, being this House of Lords because of their virtue and wisdom, their personal virtue and wisdom. So there's more wisdom to be found in the other frames of government, being composed or intended to be composed of the most experienced citizens. But there's less honesty than in a republic and less strength than in a monarchy. Because each of those people that bring in the House of Lords have their own particular interest. They have people that are looking at them, and sometimes they may say the mantra of their political faction. They'll say, whatever it is, drill more wells. They have a clue what they're talking about. They're going to say, drill more wells. I'm here to say we must drill more wells. What's that? What do you mean? I don't know. I don't know. It's on a 3x5 card. It's right here. 3x5. So I'm being quite facetious. What I'm saying is that you don't know what their particular influence is. So they say honesty. Let's just raw honesty. What do you really think? Well, if I said what I think, I might not be here next year.
I won't get any
Yes.
votes.
I had somebody who you've heard of in the news say to me one day when I asked him, well, why did you vote yes on that bill and you were against it? Well, there's very few pro-life voices here in the legislature. And they told me, if you don't vote yes, you're out of here. The people in power, of my party told me, if you don't vote yes on this compromise bill, you're out of here. And I'm needed for the pro-life vote. Huh.
Yeah.
I got a sneaking suspicion that God can raise up somebody else on the pro-life vote who will stand their conscience. You know, they're no longer in the legislature, and neither is the person who threatened them. So that's interesting. But it ended up being an unconstitutional law in Virginia, blah, 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 big craziness that went on. But so here it was he being really honest? No. You thought it was unlawful. Yeah, I just didn't think it would really, I think the localities would turn it, you know, they had all this pragmatic reasons why he didn't vote his conscience. Because somebody told him, you won't be here next year. So there's less honesty in this aristocracy. Monarchy. Here we are still on page 10. A monarchy, indeed the most powerful of any, all the sinews of government being knit together, united in the hand of the prince. But then there is imminent danger of his employing that strength to improvident or oppressive purposes. England had history of tyrants, of kings exercising their power for their own gratification. I mean, the fact that the king was the head of the Church of England, you know, instead of the Pope, had a lot to do with a particular king with particular passions and wanting to make sure that it was just crazy. Yeah, you watch the movie, read the book, whatever you're going to do. It's really weird. So obviously, the problem is with democracies and aristocracies. At this time, they formed the Constitution. They were in an aristocracy in the Articles of the Confederation. There were several, I don't know, like a dozen presidents of the United States before George Washington that were there for a year each, right? No power. Nobody remembers them. They're not in the books, okay? But there were presidents of the United States. Very weak as far as the executive power, the monarch power of government. So here we go. Now, before I continue on here, does anybody have any questions? Now, I wish somebody would ask a question. Have I not stimulated any thoughts here? It's okay if I don't, because my credibility is in the Abeka book. So I don't have to be absolutely effective. But is there anything that I've said that has just stirred your heart that you think, oh, wow, I didn't think about that? Yes?
I find it interesting how in the democracy they say that it's the a large public virtue or goodness of intention is more likely to be found, when in all reality man is fallen and the heart is wicked above all things and deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
Who can know it?
It's like, yeah, that's going to be the most virtuous one. Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you. That's the kind of feedback I was looking for.
You see all the stuff that's going on now, and it all means well, but in the end, something tyrannical in the sense of overstepping authority is going to happen. Like, where is the limit? Where does it stop? So.
And I'm just looking at what happened in Syria. You know, the guys that are rebel or whatever, the guys who are the democratic, popular, whatever. It may not even be a majority, but with the faction that's rising up is taking people who disagree with them and shooting them. Not much virtue in that. They think it is. They think it's virtuous.
My heart tells me to shoot them.
Yes. Yes. Stalin killed lots of people for the people. Okay? Because they weren't. You are not thinking right. Well, I disagree.
have to kill them, sorry.
Yeah, so much for honesty, right? So, yeah, you're being honest. Boom, you're dead. Okay. So, but that's monarchical power, you know, using supposedly the will of the people. But you're right. I wondered about that too. Virtue. Well, one thing you can do about the democratic thing is you can convince the crowd of your cause, and it takes wisdom at the aristocracy to listen to the people and then at the same time be responsible for them and maybe meet them halfway. Yes?
In regard to the thing about the democracy, the second thing I think makes more sense than the first, the goodness of intention part, because I believe that most people are not going to vote for something that they think is wrong. It's their sense of right and wrong, or lack thereof, that is leading to problems in the laws that are being created, the laws that are being carried out. I don't think people are going to vote for a law that just seems wrong to them. I think they have good intentions, but unfortunately, what they're about their moral right and wrong is so skewed that to me that's not right, and according to God's law that's not right. So they have good intentions, but their virtue, the virtue part of that, I think is a little bit off the mark.
I'm going to use an analogy. The guys who were first coming with the ideas and mechanisms for flight had great intentions, a lot of passion. There's a little bit of math they didn't do. So even when they figured out lift, I'm watching, Isaac's got some aviation study, I'm listening. And there was a certain thing about control, all right, that they didn't understand. You know, we needed a couple of guys, bicycle designers who were eating Good and Plenty candy or something like that and figured out twist and all that kind of stuff with wings. And, you know, there was just some certain math that you've got to apply or there's going to be catastrophe. So I watched a presidential debate today that happened last night, and they were appealing to people's passions. Isn't it good and right that it's like this? Well, I happen to know some of the information about the details, and they weren't telling the details to the people. They weren't saying what was totally, completely contrary to the Constitution and why it was in the Constitution that way for their safety. They weren't mentioning that. So they will appeal to people's int. Okay? Good comments. Any more? Thank you. So, monarchy, strength. Let's go down the bottom of 10. We'll be wrapping this up here shortly here. But happily for us in this island, last paragraph. Oh, wait. Back up. Where does it say monarchy? Okay, next paragraph. Thus, these three species of government have, all of them, their several perfections and imperfections. Democracies are usually the best calculated to wreak the end of the law, aristocracies to invent the means by which that end shall be obtained, and monarchies to carry those means into execution. We have an executive department. And the ancients, as was observed, had in general no idea of any other permanent form of government but these three. And then Cicero quotes something in Latin, which I do not understand. Thank you. Yet Tacitus treats this notion of a mixed government formed out of them all, in part partaking of the advantage of each, as a visionary whim. Isn't that something? So they're reading from Blackstone about the ancients, the Roman guys, the people back in the original republics, as saying it's a visionary whim, and one that, if effected, could never be lasting or secure. Now, when we hear guys coming out of the Constitutional Convention and you'll see writings now, I think you'll take note in your mind when you see things that the founders wrote about, are we going to be able to pull it off? Let's see whether this is going to last. And it kind of comes back to this comment here of whether or not you could pull such a mixed government off, make it last. But happily for us in this island, the British Constitution has long remained, and I trust will long continue, a standing exception to the truth of this observation. For as with us, the executive power of the laws is lodged in a single person, their monarch. They have all the advantages of strength and dispatch that are found to be in the most absolute monarchy. So the constitutional writers could say, hey, this is an element that we really need right now. It's not there in the articles. It really isn't, effectively. We had a few years to watch this, is not working. And as the legislature of the kingdom is entrusted to three distinct powers, that's interesting. The three distinct powers of the legislature, entirely independent of each other. First, the king. So here's their legislative power, the three branches that Blackstone considered for the frame of government that existed in English. The king, secondly, the Lord spiritual and temporal, which is the aristocratical assembly of persons selected for their piety, their birth, their wisdom, their valor, or their property. And thirdly, the House of Commons, freely chosen from the people from among themselves, which makes it a kind of democracy. As this aggregate body, actuated by different springs and attentive to different ends, composes the British Parliament and has a supreme disposal of everything, there can be no inconvenience be attempted by either of the three branches, but will be withstood by one of the other two, each branch being armed with a negative power sufficient to repel any innovation which it shall think inexpedient or dangerous. So here they are. Here's, again, this was published just 10 years prior to the Declaration of Independence, 20 years prior to them getting together to talk about this Constitution. This was the popular reading. And it really went through, and What was neat about it, it wasn't in the midst of a crisis of government disruption. Everything in England, and when this was written, was doing pretty well. And he was examining the government, examining the theories of government, the theories of law, and commenting freely without being nailed to a tree or being put on a wooden stick out in the bay while the tide was down. So it was done well. It was very, very well done. So here they are examining what Sir William Blackstone said about the monarch, the aristocracy, and the democracy. So these are the things, and what are the elements? And then the next paragraph goes on and talks about, it just summarized the supreme power being lodged in any of these. If you go on the next paragraph and the third sentence, it says, if the supreme power were lodged in any one of the three branches separately, we must be exposed to the inconveniences of either absolute monarchy, aristocracy, or democracy. And so want two of the three principal ingredients of good polity, either virtue, wisdom, or power. Go down to the bold, and I'll just end my reading there. For if ever it should happen that the independence of any one of three should be lost, or that it should become subservient to the views of either of the other two, there would soon be an end of our Constitution. You're going to see that happening over and over and over. If you read a court case, going to the Supreme Court, did the executive department exercise the power of the legislature in doing what they did? Did the executive department exercise the power of the judicial branch in doing what they did? They violated the Constitution, they exceeded their authority, so they are acting in tyranny. This is what the founders of your Constitution, the framers of your Constitution, were reading. It's good stuff. That's why I'm giving it to you. Now, are there any questions or comments on that? Hunter?
So with that, it says for if it ever should happen that the independence of any one of the three should be lost, or that should become subservient to the views of the other. So if the executive branch influences the legislative branch, and it becomes not necessarily subservient, but malleable to the views of the executive branch, then the meaning of the Constitution would be lost.
And your freedom and your liberty, your will to do those things that are lawful in spite of somebody else's opinion to the contrary. Even to the point of, it'll all, to me, the important thing, and if you know me, the freedom of a religion. What's the basis? What's the background? Actually, it's to protect Christianity, ultimately. Now, I've got just a couple more things I want to say. There was something, part of my motive here is for you to think about anything you read. There's nothing new under the sun. What's the biblical basis for it? What's the fundamental principles behind it? I'm going to give you an assignment here that's going to going to work itself into the course of this, through the length of this course. One of the things I want you to do is to have a sense of the why. You have a sense of the why, then when something that's wrong pops up, you'll go, wait a minute, I haven't got the page memorized in the Constitution, but I know it's there. I know that's an offense to the Constitution. It came up when I was listening to the debates, and I went, well, let's just throw away the Constitution. As I was listening to the debates, I thought about the Chick-fil-A song. The sick but true. There's a famous court case you're going to hear people quote a lot, and it is Marbury versus Madison. And everybody said that's when they determined that the Supreme Court could nullify laws. I forget the word they used, but basically declare things unconstitutional. Actually, they didn't do that. In the court case, they mentioned in a side statement that anything contrary to the Constitution is void. If the legislature passes an act that violates the Constitution, well, they didn't have any authority to do it. So guess what? It isn't a law. It doesn't exist. hey, that's unconstitutional. No, it literally, it doesn't exist as a law. So the court doesn't say, hey, you can't do that. What the court does is it steps over here and says, in my court, I'm going to ignore that. It doesn't say, hey, executive, you can't enforce that. It doesn't say, legislature, you're going to have to change that. It says, hey, buddy, you may try to influence me with that act of legislation, but I'm reading my boundary book. It doesn't fall in there, so I'm la 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 la. To me, I don't even read it. That's actually what they said. The legislature had come up with a judge. Here, this guy's going to be appointed judge. Well, the executive department didn't want to execute that. Didn't want to do their part to put the person into office. So they never acted on the legislation. So the legislature sued the Secretary of State, James Madison, who knew something about the Constitution, and knew that, hey, I'm a separate branch. Appreciate your motivation, all that int that you have to stick this guy in as a judge. And we think he's the wrong person, so we're not going to do anything to put him into office. He's not going to get paid. There's a whole lot of things aren't going to happen that are our requirement to do. Well, they sued James Madison and say, you've got to force him to do what we wrote as a law. And the Supreme Court, actually, if you read the case, goes, wait a minute. It says here in Article 3, it gives us all our powers as a court. You know what we don't see in there? What you just asked us to do. You just asked us to do something that we haven't been given the authority to do. That's exactly what Marbury versus Madison is. The whole government was based on these checks and balances, was saying, by what authority? Well, first, to show standing in our court here, the Supreme Court, we've got this Constitution, and it says that you haven't told us that we can entertain your silly complaint. It's between you and the executive department. It's between you and the people who can kick the curtain executive out of office in a couple of years. But as far as a rule book is, you have not given me the power to execute what you want me to do. So there's a lot of stuff now that it's morphed into this thing where the Supreme Court starts telling us what law is. Telling us okay to kill the unborn. No, it isn't. Never has been, never will be. Okay? Now Texas, you know what actually the Roe versus Wade just said, Texas, you haven't in this court case shown us the motivation behind the statute that prohibits or cause a punishment for killing the unborn. Duh! It's because Texas didn't quote the Bible, okay? It's been there forever. They didn't actually go in and say, well, when we wrote the law, it was a no-brainer. We didn't know that you'd want us to have a whole history written out so you determine why. We said this is the punishment for this behavior. It's always been wrong. We just regulate it. We made it regular. You know what I mean? That's really what, if you read the court case and all the things and listen to the audio of the oral argument, that's really what the court case was. In fact, Texas could have gone back as a legislature and says, for the following reasons, for the following history, this is why it's wrong. And then if somebody would have complained and sued him again in the Supreme Court could have gone, wow, you guys, I see why you did this. Well, in Texas, I'd really advise you not killing the unborn because you might go to jail. Okay? What's happened is we think that the Supreme Court declares something, an activity, as constitutional. No, that is not their job. But we have not been educated. We don't know. We're just busy in our chimerical entertainment systems. Yes, it's not laughable. I'm sorry. So it's a little bit of speech there. But when I went back and read all this that the founders were reading, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my goodness. We are so off track and we're reaping the consequences. Okay? So here's your assignment. In your syllabus, and then, we're going to read the assignment, then we're going to go to a quote from Benjamin Franklin. This old guy. Hopefully he's not dead now. Lord knows. The assignment I gave you, I handed you some, in the syllabus, it says to do the next section. No it doesn't. It doesn't say to do the next section.
It says read the United States Constitution, Article 1.
Read the United States Constitution, Article 1. Skip the dumb section, having them tell you what it says. Read it. But before you do, notice the next line there, it says, do the project that I was supposed to hand you last week, but I didn't read this week, so, okay, I'm sorry. What happened is I gave you something. I'm gonna have you read something, another Blackstoneism, before you read the Constitution. Okay? And the thing I'm gonna have you read is this thing. It's 20 pages, it's huge. Book the first, chapter the first of the absolute rights of individuals. Of the absolute rights of individuals. I want you to read the entire thing. This is something that those who framed this Constitution and wrote Article 1 were highly familiar with. It's going to come back in our conversations. I want you to read on the absolute rights of individuals, and I want you to do what I said the first time. I want you to take a highlighter. Some stuff's already made bold or underlined if I thought it was significant for different reasons. And I want you to highlight it. If it's something that strikes you, oh my goodness, that's in the Bible, I want you to write it down. Oh, even if you don't remember the verse, just the word is in the Bible. If it's like, ooh, I think that was in the Declaration of Independence. Ooh, I think that's in the Bill of Rights. Ooh, I think there's something. Something that strikes you as significant, I want you to highlight it in different color highlighter. I don't care what it is, because ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm trying to figure out what the final is going to be. And I may be posing a question, write an essay on the following thing out of here, and compare what he said to the Declaration of Independence, or the Bible, or the Bill of Rights, or something. I'm still formulating what the final assignment will be as we progress. But I want you to go through this thoroughly, and if you don't understand it, mark that. I don't know what chimerical is. All right? I don't know what it is. Whatever, I don't even know how to say it right. Laughable. Whatever it is, I want you to highlight it. And when you feel like, if it's confusing, circle it. Mom, please try to explain that. 320-2220. Mr. David, could you explain that? It sounds profound. I'm a little confused on the wording. Give me a call. Toll free, 888-204-8246. You can do that, it goes to the same phone. Sorry. So, and then after you do that, then read Article 1. And as you're going through Article 1, you may see stuff that you're like, oh my goodness, I just read that in Blackstone. That little prohibition. The Congress may, the legislature may do the following thing and they may not do the other thing. Article 1, Section 8, what they can do. Article 1, Section 9, what they can't. And you're going to see things. Oh, I know the why of the can't here. I know why this is in Section 9 because Blackstone just said this is a knucklehead thing to do. You got to make sure you don't do this. Okay? So it's read this thing that I gave you. And then the last thing I want you to do after that is then read the other thing I just gave you. Starting at page 3, 4, and 5. The thing I gave you that was small, it was on the study of law section, the first. I want you to read pages 3, 4, and 5. I don't think they're numbered. They're not numbered. I wish they were. I forgot to put numbers on. But it's on the study of law section, the first. There's 7 pages total, a little stapled thing I gave you. But they're front and back, so it's only 4 pages thick. And it's page, 3, 4, and 5. Second sheet of paper in. And read that after you read